Hello, everyone. Welcome to the now third episode of the Mestizocast. And today, what I'm going to be talking about is three, I guess, of the largest, or not really largest, but maybe most important ideologies that Hispanic America is facing today. And some of these may be uncommon, though still I think it's important to talk about these when talking about politics in Hispanic America in the wider sense. And of course, there are more than just these, but in the larger scale, you can kind of fit these three quite neatly when it comes to I guess the history of Hispanic American politics and where we are today, as well as which kind of ideologies are rising among the populace. And in these, and the ones I'm talking about today are Monroism, Hispanism, and Bolivarism. Now, some of these may sound familiar, and in the context that I'm using them, it may be a little bit different to how others may hear these terms and perceive them. And I'm what mainly allowed me to, or what really got me to start thinking about these is a book by Jose Vasconcelos called Monroismo y Bolivarismo. And I don't believe it has a translation into English just yet, so if if you don't know how to read Spanish, then I recommend you learn how to, because it's a good book. It's very insightful, especially about earlier Hispanic history and the differences between the Pan-Americanism of I guess the Yankee doctrine of Monroism and the truly like Bolivarian style Pan-Americanism. Though I also decided to add Hispanism today because it is an ideology that I am kind of seeing pop up lately, which I believe should be addressed in some way. And you will hear my opinions on it later. But for right now, uh, let's start with Monroism and just what is Monroism. And this is probably going to be what I would guess to be the most straightforward of the three that I'm talking about today, just in name. And, obviously relating to the Monroe Doctrine. And the way I have it written down is that it's American imperialism in Hispanic America in the name of protection, democracy, and Pan-Americanism. And Pan-Americanism is the big thing of Monroeism, at least when it comes to the North American implementation of the doctrine. Because, believe it or not, the United States does, to a certain extent, hold hold a degree of Pan-Americanism. However, their Pan-Americanism is, of course, centralized within themselves, within Washington, within the the what was before the Anglo-Protestant world into what is now more and more turning into this sort of Anglo-progressive atheistic view that's basically being centralized within itself. And and even though the use of like Monroeism in the United States is it's not as as clear to everyone. It's not as open as it was before. It's still going on, and we're going to see that it keeps happening. I mean, the most recent example is was with the U.S. aid thing, uh, basically using pouring a ton of funds into progressive propaganda pieces in Hispanic America, like the transgender comic book and everything. And I mean, I watched an interview on on the CNN clip of basically this Doge member and and the CNN anchor, basically kind of, I guess, debating on on this kind of stuff. With of course the Doge member saying like, "Oh, it's not in America's best interest to pour this money into this kind of stuff," blah blah blah. And the CNN anchor kind of, I don't know if this was like some kind of slip or if like or what, but he made a very good point that, and this is kind of the way that I've viewed it ever since this whole controversy kind of got leaked. And that is that the CNN anchor said that that all this money that America is pouring into with U.S. aid and this kind of stuff. The example they used, I remember, was Iraqi Sesame Street. But of course, you can apply this to practically every part of U.S. aid, including what they've been using their funds towards in Hispanic America, with the transgender stuff, the progressive stuff. And the CNN anchor said that that's soft power. And I have to say, I mean, I think it's clear that that's true. Soft power is ultimately the way that the U.S. is best at securing its international interests. And that ultimately goes hand in hand with Monroism, this Pan-Americanism that America must be united under liberal democratic values and under the kind of protection of the United States. And and obviously it's important to fight against Monroism, as the big problem is that the American ideal and the, I guess, American spirit is not based in something moral or something that's very good for us. It's based largely in consumerism and progressive values and liberalism, things that go completely against the Hispanic ethos, and especially the mestizo ethos in Hispanic America. And and that's really that was made evident by even the times of the revolutions. Many people, even Bolivar himself, would recognize that the United States was only working to make herself the sole hegemon of the American continent, both north and south. That would that I mean, as Bolivar said, it would be they would spread misery in the name of liberty. And again, Jose Vasconcelos touches on this in his book. And but of course things have kind of have kind of changed a lot since then. Not in the sense that the Yankees stopped using Monroism, or stopped having Monroism as kind of its core ideology when it comes to geopolitics in Latin America, but also that Monroism has it's evolved to the point where it's not unique to the United States. And what do I mean by that? Because in the definition I gave, I specifically called out American imperialism and Pan Americanism, though Pan Americanism and and the word American can also be used interchangeably for other powers as well, and it would still be Monroism at its core. Because what is inherent within the ideology of Monroism is basically offering this sort of promise of goodness in their eyes to the Hispanic countries. So while America will offer, they'll expand their hegemony to Hispanic America in the name of things like protection, democracy, liberalism, freedom, whatever, and of course Pan Americanism. You have countries like Russia and China who who basically promote their own hegemony over Hispanic America in the name of anti-imperialism, in kind of the name of the global South, in the name of multipolarity. That's what you see a lot right now, and this has really caused a kind of a false dichotomy within Hispanic American politics, where you have one side who is where most people view politics in this way at this point. Maybe they don't view it intrinsically, but it's just kind of the way that things are. Where you're either with the United States or you're with Russia and China. You're either for democracy and freedom, or you're for multipolarity and anti-imperialism, which are of course false dichotomies, because on one end you have the United States trying to exert their power over you, and on the other you have China or Russia or whatever country trying to exert their power onto you. And that's what I mean by that Monroism is not unique to the United States. It's become a global phenomenon that's been practiced very clearly by powers outside of the United States. Currently, it's Russia and China, while previously it was the Soviet Union, basically pulling the same thing, just with different promises and different degrees of goodness and protection and whatever. And you see this a lot online too, where a lot of people don't understand that this false dichotomy exists in the first place. So they will end up attaching themselves to one side. Like if you talk to most, at least in my personal experience, my own real life kind of background, most Hispanics are very, very much pro-U.S., especially if you live in the United States, of course, because they came here, and in my case, coming from Venezuela, it's pretty easy to get that kind of case. But online, especially in the more nationalistic circles, you see this kind of you see this kind of fascination and this obsession with China and Russia in the way that we need to side with Russia. Russia and China work in our best interests. they get so caught up in 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 the American implementation of Monroism that they totally ignore the fact that Russia and China does practically the exact same thing. It's all of it is just trying to turn all the powers do not want the best interest for Hispanic America or for mestizos, and that's what people really need to understand. That all they want is the way that they view South America and by extension obviously Central America and Mexico is that they view it as a kind of playground, as a kind of proxy playground where they basically play their hand against the United States to see how they can one up their opponent, uh, and how they can kind of get one country to be totally on their side. And this has been kind of clear if you look at the geopolitics of Hispanic America, and especially if you look at places like Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, etc., and recently Brazil too, with kind of you know this super pro-China stance, a super pro-Russia stance, while at the same time you also have countries like to a certain Argentina's a big example. Colombia to a kind of certain extent, and especially El Salvador. Now I know El Salvador has a lot of good things going for it, but it's still El Salvador is still under the control of kind of this like Yankee Monroe doctrine, and uh, and this is where you kind of like see how both the East and the West are kind of playing their hand, trying to see, oh, I can promise more development, I can promise more money, I can promise more material prosperity if you side with me over them. And that's why, and that's kind of how Monroism has become the prevailing ideology of Hispanic America. Because Monroism is ultimately the ideology of both the left and the right in Hispanic America, where the right is very pro United States and the left is very pro Russia and pro China. Though of course you do see this kind of division in Colombia, where like you have like the more progressive leftists like Petro, who basically they're basically like American progressives for the most part, not really Colombian in the slightest. They basically just they'll talk about American imperialism, stuff like that, and then just like literally bow down to the United States at any point they can get. But regardless, that's I guess that's the thing that I'd like to really hammer down right now, that Monroism is not unique to the United States. Monroism is a global phenomenon against the sovereignty of mestizos, of Hispanic Americans, of Iberian Americans, and that is something that we must recognize, and why Monroism is such a danger. And just understand, take a look, and know that that is the enemy we're facing against. That is the prevailing ideology of Hispanic America. And next, I'd like to talk about Hispanism, and I'd like to first clarify that Hispanism is not the same as Hispanidad. Hispanidad is the acknowledgement that there is a prevailing Hispanic Iberian cultural connection between Spain, Portugal, and all of the Ibero-American countries. That there is that connection, and that there is that prevailing culture among us, and that's not what Hispanism is in the context that I'm using it today. Hispanism, and this isn't necessarily a very popular idea. However, it's something that I do see growing quite a bit, at least in the online sphere, that I would like people to kind of be wary of, because it's very easy to fall into this kind of mentality, and at some point a long time ago, I've also fallen into this kind of this trap. And Hispanism is basically the desire for Hispanic America to get resubjugated into this neo-Spanish empire and become one with the Iberian Peninsula, become one with Spain, Portugal, etc. And I believe this is also a massive problem. And again, I used to subscribe to this kind of thinking. However, the more you look into history, the more you kind of look into not just history but culture and and other things. You realize that this is not a great ideology to really believe in, and it should definitely not be the prevailing ideology of Hispanic America, because there is a lot of bad fruit that I've seen that comes with this kind of ideology. For one, um, these groups are ripe with basically ideas of like Spanish supremacy. Now they won't say it they won't say it out loud. However, it's very very obvious just by the point alone that they want Spain, that has a relatively small population compared to many other countries in Hispanic America, to basically have the same position they did back then, where though of course the goal was like a meritocratic society, but unfortunately, in practice, it was dominated by Spanish peninsulars, and that's kind of what I see with these people trying to bring it back. And usually they will do it with like either this background of like an internalized basically kind of neo-Nazi white supremacist mentality, or they will do it in like this super like trad cath kind of mentality as well, like a total like rejection of nationalism, etc. And of course with the trad kind of argument, there's good intentions behind that. I mean, the Enlightenment it didn't bring any good to the world, right? However, we also have to understand that that there were problems that arose from that system, even if there is a lot of what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess nostalgia. Nostalgia is the word I'm looking for that like kind of very wholesome, closely knit together kind of feudal medieval Catholic society. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, Catholicism is an integral part of Hispanic America, of course. However, both of these sides that you have basically Hispanism on have many different problems. Like, of course, with like the whole like white national, like not really white nationalist, but like white subjugation part. Like, oh, like I'm a Creole and I think we should the exactly the type of like stuff I'm talking about. And obviously that's totally against everything that like Hispanic America is kind of like has been. We are largely we are mestizo, regardless of the ethnicity of your area. Like if you're like kind of like whiter like Uruguay, or more indigenous like Peru or Bolivia, you the mestizaje, the miscegenation, still exists culturally, and even then, it existed ethnically with their ancestors. I mean, Uruguay used to be very, very largely mestizo until a large influx of European immigrants came in. Same thing with Buenos Aires in Argentina. Though even then, Argentina isn't like Argentines like to cope with kind of the idea that they're white, they're European. They're not even ethnically, but regardless, even with those who are 100% pure Spanish, pure white, pure indigenous, pure African, whatever, the simple fact that you live there and you interact with that culture and that you grew up in it means that you are a product of the mestizaje, because the mestizaje is not just ethnic, it's also cultural and spiritual. And that's why and I mean, there I don't really have to say this, I don't think, but it's quite obvious why that view is incompatible with Hispanic America. And with, I guess, the more trad kind of view of Hispanism, of basically merging with Spain again, creating, like, reviving the Spanish Empire under a trad monarchy. It totally ignores basically everything about our history and our culture, because at some point um in history there was a divergence between the Iberian and the Mestizo. And again, by Mestizo I don't simply mean as a racial category of mixed people of ethnically mixed people in Hispanic America, but just like, because mestizo can apply to practically all Hispano Americans because of that cultural mestizaje. Though of course the ethnic part is a big part of it as well. But there was this divergence. We in Hispano America we kept that imperial spirit, that imperial culture that Spain basically created, and Spain diverged from it. And you get a lot of these misconceptions when it comes to the revolutions in Hispanic America, where many believe that it was basically like this liberal, Masonic kind of like idea to get liberated from Spain, when in reality, you read many documents from the people who were fighting for independence from Spain, and they said it very clearly that the crown was no longer Spanish. And of course, for them, it wasn't like something about being ethnically Spanish. It was about that Spanish spirit, that at the time, that imperial Spanish spirit that was compatible with the mestizaje, that was compatible with the mestizo values of Hispanic America, and that was basically gone by that point, and that's why it was necessary to separate from the crown. And I mean, this is just clear if you look at how Spain turned out later. I mean, look at the Spanish Civil War, and I mean, obviously look at Spain now. It's completely it's a completely different entity from what it used to be. And of course, the mestizo and while the mestizo in Hispanic America has elements, has cultural and ethnic elements from the indigenous and the African, uh, and with, of course, the imperial Spanish or Portuguese, if you live in Brazil, um, that is how our culture is derived from the mestizaje. The mestizaje and us as a people are inseparable. And of course, the Iberia doesn't have this. To a certain extent, they do, because of the mixing of culture of the Moors and the Iberians. Um, however, it's still important to acknowledge that the the cultural, that basically how the flower bloomed, right? in Hispanic America is different from how the flower bloomed in Iberia. And and yes, while Iberia did create that imperial Spanish kind of society, that culture, it it landed on us. It landed on the American continent, created the mestizaje, created the mestizo race and people, and that imperial spirit stuck with us. It is stuck. It is an integral part of Hispanoamerica because it got mixed because of the mestizaje that occurred, because of the mestizaje that basically held that integral Spanish imperial culture, and that it got mixed with the many different indigenous and Africans that came. It's inseparable from us, and it's part of this greater mestizo culture, this greater Hispano-American, Ibero-American culture that was created. It basically stuck with us that way. It got tied into this basically triad that created who we are. And on the other hand, Spain didn't have that, and Spain was growing closer and closer and closer to Europe, where they were able to lose that imperial spirit ever since Napoleon invaded. And of course, the Spanish were great fighters against the rule of Napoleon and liberalism. However, this didn't last. Of course, you had the Spanish Republic, which was extremely liberal, and then it even descended into the Spanish Civil War, where you had like communists and anarchists, where people were persecuting, where like the left was persecuting nuns, and basically, and just it was a completely demonic kind of idea. And really, the only it when you really look into the Spanish Civil War, the only really surviving the only way that kind of the Imperial Spain's last breath died with Franco. It died with Francisco Franco, and even if the actual like Falange won, I'm not sure if it would have been possible. Maybe it would have been more possible because, well, Franco is more of like a traditionalist, like monarchist, who allowed the monarchy to return after his death, while the Falange weren't really interested in the monarchy, and ultimately the monarchy basically destroyed Spain. That's another thing that I'll get into with Hispanism and kind of this idea of like this like trad monarchy, this trad Spanish monarchy. Uh, Franco and the Falange represented this last dying breath of imperial Spain, and Franco was so caught up in this idea of this kind of traditionalist monarchy. I mean, and Franco, he admired Bolivar. He admired our liberators. He as a great offspring of Spain. But ultimately, when he died, ever the any sort of any remaining uh appearance to Imperial Spain died completely, as you have, the new like monarch, who the new monarchy that's extremely liberal, basically turns Spain into just like another like democratic European nation. And that's another thing. At this point, if you want your trad monarchy from Spain, I mean, good luck trying to find any member of the Spanish crown who would be remotely like willing to like basically enact this kind of ideals, and that who won't liberalize society to an even further point. Good luck with that, because that is not going to happen. And a big part of these people is that they completely reject and have total hatred for our kind of ancestral heroes, like Bolivar. They don't understand the reason for our separation and ultimately our cultural divergence. And at the same time, they'll understand that there are differences, but also they kind of view us with kind of with resentment, because and this is where kind of the internalized ideas of Spanish, of or specifically Castilian supremacy basically come in, with, like, they hold resentment towards us for rebelling against the crown and for not allowing Spain to reign supreme. And this is not to disparage the Spanish in any way. I quite love Spain, of course, as our paternal root, and of course with Hispanidad, uh, every Hispanic should embrace Hispanidad, and know and appreciate their Spanish roots. However, what we need to understand as mestizos, regardless of whether we live in the fatherland or whether we live in the United States, we are the successors to the Iberians and the indigenous and the Africans that came. We are their successors, but we are also not the same as them. We created something new, something different from them. And ultimately, just it's kind of common sense that if you concentrate power back into Spain, it's only going to result in the continued subjugation of our people. And I don't necessarily think that Hispanics have a. I don't necessarily believe that they have bad intentions or that they're evil. I do think that a lot of where they come from, depending on the angle that they're coming at this from, I believe there are good intentions behind it. However, it's a bad solution, and it can easily turn into bad intentions. But now I want to basically hammer in what the third option, the third way, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And that is Bolivarism. Now, again, this is another term that has very much been appropriated by certain groups, especially in Venezuela, where it's been appropriated into something that's totally different. Because Bolivarism used to be known as exactly what I'm about to explain in a minute, but now it's kind of been now it's been distorted by Chavez and Chavistas like Maduro into basically like turning Bolivarism and appropriating his name to believe like for this kind of like left wing socialist like hellhole that Venezuela is in now. Um, and that's kind of been expanded as well to other places. But that is not what Bolivarism truly is, and that's why it's important to separate to not. It's important to not allow these people to basically take that word and use it for themselves. Refer to it as what it truly is. It's Chavismo. But Bolivarism is something far different, something that we need to embrace as Hispanic Americans. And that is the desire for the union of the Ibero-American countries into one. It's about Hispano-American unity, about an acknowledgement of our unique nature, of our unique but also shared nature across the continent. It rejects both the kind of liberal washed image of independence, the idea of like the kind of liberal, like kind of tone that many people have today when it comes to Hispanic American independence, but it also rejects a rejection of what our ancestors stood for. It rejects totally painting the ancestors that fought for independence as like basically like evil, um, you know, um, evil like liberals who were trying to fight against the crown. No, it's different from that. And it accurately sees that Hispanoamerica, regardless of where you are, regardless of whether you're in Mexico, Argentina, uh, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, the Antilles, um, that we are all one nation, just divided among different states. This is the reality that that Bolivarism accurately understands, and this is what our destiny as a people is to basically look towards. And probably in another video I'll get into why what I call petty nationalism, or like petite nationalism, is very bad. I mean, and I'll just kind of touch a little bit here that it that internalized it is like Monroism essentially, but it's this is what I'll go into today with that Bolivarism like it acknowledges that we are all comprised of one nation, of one mestizo nation from California to Tierra del Fuego. That all the countries derived from Spain and from Portugal on the American continent are or do consist of one nation, with every kind of national culture representing more of a regional culture that belongs to part of that same root. We're all different branches on the same tree that got planted by Spain on American soil. And the the mestizo like ethos is different from the Spanish ethos. I mean, and as Bolivarism correctly recognizes, uh, it's inherently Hispanic. The mestizo ethos is inherently Iberian. It's inherently Hispanic. However, it is different from the Spanish for the reasons that I said earlier. And like I said before, mestizo is more than just a racial classification, or at least when it comes to ethnicity. It's cultural. It's large, and in large part it is ethnic, but mainly it's cultural and civilizational. Creoles, indigenous, other people who are part of this greater mestizo Hispanic American culture are mestizos, due to the way they think, the culture that they participate in. And the reality is that Bolivarism is the only true option for Hispano Mestizo sovereignty. It is the only way that we can be truly sovereign in the world we live in, as right now it is clear that Hispanic America is nothing more than just a proxy playground. It's a playground for proxy for proxies for other powers to basically use us. And there are many different people who subscribe to this idea. Many great people. Of course, there's Jose Vasconcelos and Bolivar, obviously. But there's also many other philosophers who subscribe to this Hispano-American ideal, such as Julio Casatigarino, Pedro Albizu Campos, Jose de San Martin, you know, a lot of like Southern Cone like kind of nationalist people aren't gonna like that, but yeah, Jose de San Martin was a Hispano-Americanist, and he wanted a union with Gran Colombia. It didn't work out for several reasons, but that was ultimately the goal of all of our ancestors when they were fighting for sovereignty on the American continent. And I guess the last part about Bolivarism is that it correctly views history and culture, the history and culture of Hispanoamerica, as unique. Hispanoamerica, and by Hispanoamerica I mean Iberoamerica, including Brazil, has a there is a cultural, ethnic, and spiritual uniqueness that exists within it, and that is something that we should all recognize, that we are not alone, that our own regional, like national countries are not alone in this. We this is a struggle among brother nations, among brothers, that we must acknowledge and use if we want to truly be sovereign, because we will never be truly sovereign if we are divided like this, like the way we are now, because that will inevitably only lead to uh to what we have right now, to this basically subjugation from other powers because we're divided. And this is the case even if you have like a revival of if you have like a great like Southern Cone nation, or like an Antillean Confederation, Mexican Empire, kind of like neo Gran Colombia in the sense of like only Gran Colombia in the sense that like only the territories that it comprised of before. No, the only possible way for Hispanic unity to truly exist is through recognizing that we are one single nation, and that we should exist among a single state. And obviously that's going to take years to figure out and to eventually do into practice, but um, it's really the only way that we could truly be sovereign as a people. And and you know, I understand the view of kind of like of others, of just like, you know, you have this attachment to your regional, to your national identity, or quote unquote national identity, uh and especially, and it's especially hard, especially for people from Borinquen, from Puerto Rico, because you know they've never really had like a proper country of their own, and obviously that's difficult. That's difficult to kind of like handle. So like, you know, it's very easy to want this kind of confederative aspect, but the reality is that is that we Bolivarism and our sovereignty will only work under a federal system, not one where we're kind of we're like, you know, yeah, we're divided, but we have the same interests anyways. No, we have to truly be connected in one state, in one and that's what Colombia was all about in its conception when it was created by Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar did not mean for Colombia to just be Venezuela, Ecuador, New Granada, and Panama. Colombia was it's a project started and theorized by uh it's I guess how would I put it? It's a project that was meant to span across all of of Hispanoamerica, not just that area that Grand Colombia was that the Grand Colombia was limited to. Colombia is everything from Mexico to Chile and Argentina. That is what Colombia is at its heart. And this includes Mexico, this includes the Antilles, this includes Brazil. And that's what we should recognize, and what I guess uh, listeners in the United States, like, I am a mestizo, I am a Hispanic, a Venezuelan in the United States, and as pochos, we need to learn to utilize the wealth we have in this country to be able to spread this ideal. Uh, the truth is that Yankee land, that the United States has kind of been the perfect breeding ground for pen like Hispano-American thought, especially for Bolivarist thought. So I hope that everyone today enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.